No, exactly. And I think it's so important to remember that social media is exactly that. It is a highlight. No one is showing the their worst meal or a meal that doesn't look picture perfect. And I think we really do need to take the pressure off of ourselves and be kind to ourselves, because it's a massive shift. Your whole direction of your life is changing depending on, doesn't matter the scenario. And keeping it simple, focusing on one meal at a time, and when in doubt, just make sure your child is getting a multivitamin, because there are going to be weeks where you might be getting takeaway more often than not. And if you've got that multivitamin and you know at least they are getting in the nutrients that they should be getting in, but really just one meal at a time, and keep it as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate your life by now trying to make white sauce and fried this, and just really keep it simple.
That sounds like effort, and I'm already heading in the opposite direction. Hello and welcome to Blending and Mending. On the episode today, we have Gen Hesse. She is the nourished mum, so we'll share all her details as we go through the episode. But I stumbled across Jen's account because of the beautiful photos of recipes. She's a single mum, which we also realized when her and I had a touch base. And Jen, I'm just so excited that you have agreed to be on the podcast today, so thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Chantal. I found your podcast when I was going through the whole divorce process, and it's been a massive support for me. So to be included as a guest it's a big compliment. So thank you.
So I know you shared this with me when we had our previous connect, and I saw you put this on a post as well. But it hits differently every time you hear that something that you're doing makes a difference or is making a difference. So it just validates this platform. So thank you so much for that.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure. When you're doing these things, you don't often get validation. So I try and always validate as much as I can.
I'm taking it with both hands, and today the spotlight is on you. So what I'm excited about with this episode is that it's something different to what we've done on Blending and Mending before. So a lot of the episodes, as you know, has been focused on divorce guilt, co-parenting, parenting with a high conflict ex, affairs, and the mix of still trying to raise your kids. And there's been so many episodes that really touches on the harder psychological impact and support through that. What I'm excited about with this episode is it's something that's more lighthearted, it's practical, and it's absolutely needed. So what we're going to be touching on today, guys, is looking at being a single parent. In our case, you and I being single moms, and having to understand what meal prep is all about, and focusing on food and dinners and lunches and lunch boxes when you are all on your own and you don't have that tag team partner. So I'm really excited to get into the nuts and bolts. Before we do, though, Jen, tell us a little bit about yourself and the platform that you've currently got in place.
My whole journey with my own food and body image and nutrition all changed and shifted when I became a mum, basically, before the separation. And my goal was to be the best mum that I could be. And even more so when I separated and went through the divorce process, I started realizing even more so how much the role food and nutrition plays on our overall happiness and our emotional state. And my biggest drive is to be the healthiest and happiest mum I can be for my son, so that I can give him what he needs, because we all know how much children need from us when they go through all their different developmental stages. So the platform is basically to share how I am on my path to become the most nourished mum that I can be, so that I can be the happiest and healthiest mum for my son.
I love that. And I think the perspective there is something that I'm driving so much on the platform at the moment, is we need to fill our own cups. We ourselves need to be happy in order for us to show that happiness and kindness to our kids. So I absolutely resonate and relate to the cause. Food, I'm out of my depth. So I've shared with you in our previous Connect, I am by no means a cook. It's a different ball game for me altogether. But before we get into that, maybe chat through something. When you and I had our Connect, we spoke about it's not just about the practicality of food, but there's also that biological, physiological, and psychological element to it. So mind, body, soul. Why is it important for us in terms of being this integrated being, and how does food tie into that?
So the most important thing is, if you are physically feeling awful, it is so difficult to then be happy. And I think there is a massive focus on food these days about calories in, calories out, and less on the actual role it has in the functioning of our body. So if you're eating in a way that's going to give you irregular energy levels, it's not going to help benefit your gut health. It's going to decrease your immune system, or you are becoming deficient in certain nutrients which are needed for hormonal production of all of the other things that our body needs nutrients for. You're not going to physically feel great. And that's going to then lay into your emotional state as well. So I think the biggest thing is shifting the focus on food and eating in a way that's going to help your body function to the best of its ability. For example, serotonin. Serotonin, we know, is a hormone that makes us feel happy. 95% of our serotonin is produced in the gut. And if you aren't eating in a way that's going to promote gut health, you're already putting yourself in a negative aspect, because you're eating in a way that's not going to promote a healthy, happy body, which is then going to affect you from a mental standpoint as well.
What I love about that, and I know, again, we touched on this before, when you're going through a divorce, going through a separation, and I suppose that's the purpose of this platform, but any high stress, whether it's work, whatever the story might be, cortisol levels are high. And I suppose what happens there is you start craving the sugars, and you start craving the carbs, and we reach for the quick packet of chips. I am looking at the sweetie drawer right now. It's right over there. And Tristan always says I'm worse than the kids, because during the day, especially when I can feel, again, high stress, lots on my plate, feeling overwhelmed, I don't want to make a nice, quick, healthy sandwich. I quickly grab. So my default right now is Beacon Bites. It's really, really bad. That's for a Kit Kat. And we default back to the things that don't make us feel good, and it's all just compounded. So that link between what we're putting in our bodies versus how we're actually feeling, I love that connect. And I think in terms of our kids too, they're going through changes. So we even have more of a responsibility to really pay attention to what we're giving our kids to eat. In my previous life, marriage, pre-divorce, Mila's dad, Tyler, loves to cook. So that was his space in the kitchen. He would make these beautiful French Mauritian meals. His spaghetti bolognese was just out of the world. And the tag teaming that we had there is he would cook and I would clean, because I love spraying down a kitchen counter and making sure everything's super clean. Then going into the separation and divorce, I found myself feeling quite lost in the kitchen, because he used to cook, and because cooking is not something I would naturally gravitate to. I struggled during that time. I mean, Mila was 3, just over 3. So my default was I was working full time. She was at school, and I would then stock up on Willie's meals, and that would be then what we would warm up in the evenings. So how do we support the single parent who is working the full-time job and still needs to make time to cook a healthy meal? What does that look like?
I think the biggest thing there is to focus on one meal at a time. I think let's just take the pressure off ourselves instead of trying to be perfect at breakfast, lunch, and supper. I think we need to just take a massive step back and focus on one meal at a time. There is absolutely nothing wrong with convenience meals. There is a massive change these days in convenience meals being more balanced, and I think it's because people rely on them quite a lot. So my biggest suggestion is make it as easy for you as possible. So I know with myself, things like a rotisserie chicken and veggies that you can just pop into the microwave and steam, or frozen veg. There is nothing wrong with using quick cooking or ready-made foods to nourish the body. So I think we need to take the pressure off ourselves instead of saying we have to cook every single meal at home. And then I think it's also important. Well, two things that really helped me when I became a single mum. My son was really quite young. He was 18 months old. So there was a lot that I still had to do in terms of getting him ready for bed and all of that. And the two most important things was I made one meal. He ate what I ate. And the second thing was we ate together. Because I wasn't going to prep him something separate. And then once the bedtime routine had been done, at 8:30 or 9:00, then now try and feed myself, where the only thing I really wanted to do was to climb into bed. So I think from that perspective is, if you're going to do ready-made meals, that is perfectly fine. Use the pre-cooked foods or pre-prep foods as much as possible, and keep things simple. It's simply protein, starch, and a veg or a fruit. Don't overdo it, and don't try and now be the most nutritious person every single meal. Take a step back, work with the meal that you are struggling with the most, and really baby steps.
What do we do with the kid who is going through that season of life and all they want to do is eat a chicken nugget and chip? Because that was my life for the longest time.
Yes.
They would maybe have a fish finger, but that was what life looked like for me for a while. What do we do then?
So I think all children go through what they call a beige phase. And all children go through phases where they have great appetite and then they have a poor appetite. So I think the most important thing, again, is, like I mentioned in the last question, was eat with your kids, because you model a behavior to them. So if you are prepping chicken nuggets and chips, I mean, I love a frozen chip. I will eat frozen chips all day, every day. It's my weakness. It's my Achilles heel. So, but they must be cooked. No, like a frozen oven chip. I don't have to have a slab chip. I can. No, my son eats frozen chips. Actually, whenever I'm doing oven chips, I do them in the air fryer because it's a lot faster. He always wants a chip, and then he comes and he'll say two. So I must give him two frozen chips, and then he waddles off with these two frozen chips, and he's quite content. Children, hey. So I think in those instances, continuous exposure. If they're only going to be eating chicken nuggets and chips, eat with them. And if they see you, I know my son shows a lot of interest in my food when I'm eating with him. When he's at the table with me, he sees what's on my plate. He asks me what I'm eating. So the biggest thing there is continuously expose them. Do quite ready cooked starches for yourself. Get a rotisserie chicken, give them a piece of chicken on the side, because often it's what the food looks like. It's more sight that puts them off. And put a small new food on their plate all the time, continuously. My son has never liked tomatoes, and the other day I make quite a simple salad, and again reiterating the fact of just keep it simple. So it's tomato, cucumber, basil, lemon zest, and salt. And I know he only eats a cucumber, so I cut him cucumber and I put it on his plate. But he does not eat tomato. So I was sitting with him at dinner eating my salad, and he asked to taste some tomato. And it was the first time in his almost 4 years of life that he ate tomato with basil on it, because we know that children don't like anything green either, especially if it's a leaf. He ate the tomato with basil. So consistency, eat with them, and model you eating a variety of food, because they will learn from you.
It's interesting because I'm thinking now with avocado, Mila pushed back on avocado for a long time. Find like what she would eat when we would mush the meals up when they were babies. And then when they move
Yes.
over to solids, all of a sudden they don't want to eat those
Yes.
things anymore. But we're now officially back into an avo phase. So she'll eat avo on her toast. She's putting the pepper and a little bit of salt on. It's incredible. So I hear you. I suppose it comes eventually. It's just these ebbs and flows.
Exactly.
If we look at specific tips, so I think what often happens with us as parents is, again, you spoke about keep it simple. We put too much pressure on ourselves. Give me some tips that we can share with some of the parents in terms of how to really focus on meals and focus on that meal prep, for a lack of a better word, in their routines and homes.
So one of the things that I can share with you that really works for me is to plan my meals for the week and have a few meals that you have on rotation. So for me, my son is still young enough that he gets his breakfast and his lunch at school. So all I need to do is pack him a snack. But because it's just myself, I have with my lunches and my breakfast, because I'm working and it's quite busy, there is literally 2 to 3 options of breakfast and lunch that I have on rotation Monday to Friday. So keep it simple. Choose a few meals that you have on rotation that you eat, that you know you always have, whether it's yogurt and muesli in your pantry or your kitchen, or bread or wraps, something quick and simple. So keep it simple, have 2 or 3 meals that you have on rotation. And then it might sound incredibly tedious, and I do agree, but sometimes planning your food that you're going to be having for the week just takes off so much pressure in the moment. So your future self will thank you for it. So every Sunday, I sit down and I really, it's a habit I don't like doing. It's something that I find quite painstaking sometimes. And I write down what I'm going to be having I plan my breakfast, I plan my lunches, and I plan our suppers. And I then order the food and what I need. And at least I know that if it's been a really bad Tuesday and we get home late, I have ingredients to make something, whether it might not be Tuesday's dinner meal, but Thursday's dinner meal. I know it's there. There is a plan of action, and I just go into default and I make whatever it is. And most of the time, it's quick and easy. It's spaghetti bolognese, it's steak and chips or fish and chips. It's not elaborate meals. It's simple, quick meals. But planning in advance, your future self, I promise you, your future self is going to thank you for it.
Yeah, I resonate with that. So I've shared with you before. So I remember growing up, my mom would do the big monthly grocery shop. And we would have all of those bits and bobs in the fridge. And I think a lot of people today are either doing shopping on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. So we right now are defaulting into daily, where we're almost deciding on the day, what are we going to eat? And if Tristan and I don't touch base early on, the day things run away from you.
Yes.
Everyone needs something. And that's the easiest way then again to default back to a quick convenient meal, and it's not always the healthiest choice. So I like the idea of planning, you know what's in the fridge, and then you can play around with that in your own time.
Exactly. And the other thing, it might not be conventional, but the other thing that if I really don't feel like cooking, is breakfast for dinner. So eggs on toast, omelette, French toast, even oats. Sometimes we'll do oats. Oats with fruit, yogurt, and a nut butter is a perfectly balanced meal. And I think sometimes we need to get out of this box thinking that supper must be 3 veg, steak, and a starch. And quite honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're eating as long as it's healthy, as long as it's balanced. And I mean, my son absolutely loves it when we have French toast and bacon for supper. So it's okay if you are resorting to things that are not typical supper meals. If it's going to make sure you're getting in a balanced meal, then by all means, go for it.
And I suppose that reinforces how you started the episode by saying again, we put so much pressure on ourselves.
Yes.
We have this idea of what a beautiful dinner needs to look like, and you see these incredible meals on social media. But I like the idea of dinner or breakfast for dinner, and it's fun. That's something cool for the kids, something they enjoy eating, and it's quick and fast, and everyone's got what they need.
Exactly. So
very cool.
It really is. It just takes the pressure. I think we put way too much pressure on ourselves to be the perfect parent, and just keep it simple.
Mm-hmm. In one of our previous conversations, you also spoke about having themed meal nights.
Yes.
Talk us through that.
That's a fantastic idea. So when I do my meal plan on a Sunday, sometimes my imagination isn't very creative and I really struggle to figure out meals. So it's sometimes it's like pulling hen's teeth. It really is quite difficult. It's a Sunday and you're now thinking of what you're going to make for Thursday. It's not easy. So one of the tips I can suggest is doing a theme night. And if your kids are old enough, ask them what they want. So Monday could be a pasta night. Tuesday could be a burger night. Wednesday could be Mexican or nachos. Thursday or Friday could be homemade pizza. So having a theme, whether you're basing it on a culture or basing it on a meal or an ingredient like pasta, you already have that base, and then you can just build on there. So if you're, it really does make the whole meal planning for the week a lot easier and involve your kids, because one day they're going to be needing to do these things too. And if you're involving your kids with food, it makes them also more excited and open to trying new things as well.
I love that, because again, I think it takes the pressure off. There is structure and routine, and it allows, like you're saying, the whole family forms part of that. So again, just lack of pressure, there isn't that extra pressure, and you know exactly what you're going to be focusing on every day.
So it just makes it easier.
So on behalf of all moms, including myself, lunchbox ideas, Jen, please help us. So Mila and Jordan, Mila started grade 1 in the beginning of last year. And I was so protective of making her lunch. And Tristan and I actually had a bit of a wobble in the first week because he thought he was helping me and he packed her lunchbox. I came into the kitchen, I'm like, I want to pack my lunchbox.
Yeah.
100%. Fast forward a year and a half later, I don't know what to put in the lunchboxes anymore. I mean, I've shared with you briefly, Mila and Jordan also just, there's things that they like, but then they're also just so different. So Mila will do white bread, butter, ham, but I have to take the crusts off, otherwise she won't eat it. And then Jordan is no butter, crusts on, salami. It's a stretch for ham. He'll have ham, but he prefers his salami. So we're buying 2 different proteins when we know the kids are coming back to us. And it's 2 completely different lunch boxes. Then in terms of Mila likes strawberries, Jordan likes nachos. So you eventually run out of ideas of what to put into these lunch boxes. So any tips or tricks there for us?
So when it comes to lunch boxes, I have got something quite simple to help with ideas. Is the 4 F's.
Okay.
So first is something fresh, something with fat, something with fiber, and something fun. So fresh can be fruit or a vegetable, whether it's baby tomatoes and carrot sticks, nachos, strawberries, bananas. Fat, so children and toddlers, for their brain development, they need a higher fat intake than adults. So adults typically looking at anywhere between 20 and 30% of their diet should come from fat. Kids is between 30 to 40%. It's a little bit higher. So make sure there's an element of fat. It could be avo, it could be a full cream dairy like cheese, it could be nuts or a nut butter, and then fiber as well. A lot of times it's easy to pop in a processed cracker or a slice of white bread, but gut health is for us as much as it is for our kids as well. And I think a lot of kids don't get in enough fiber. So instead of doing white bread, do low GI white bread. Popcorn is a great source of fiber. Things like hummus, cocoa powder as well. So if you're doing a chocolate milkshake, which would deal with your fat your fiber as well as your fun. And that brings me to the last F, which is fun, something your kids love. It could be a food that we've been taught as unhealthy, because I try and not label foods and raise my son with foods being good or bad or treat foods. So, and it also helps to take those sort of treat foods off the pedestal, things like chocolates and sweets and marshmallows and chips. A fun food as well. So the 4 F's: something fresh with fat, fiber, and fun. And then the other thing, which is so, so important, is a protein. And whether that's coming from dairy or whether it's coming from cold meat, like salami or ham or boiled egg or a little meatball. But protein is so important for stabilizing blood sugar. So if you're packing your child a fruit, pretzels, and a jam sandwich, there is almost very little protein in that meal. And as much as we are focusing on how we're feeling, we also need to relate the same to our kids. So 4 F's as well as a protein, or a dairy, because dairy is also a source of protein. So if you're ticking all those boxes, then you know you're going to get a balanced lunchbox for your kid.
Where does Nutella fit into this? Because I've just realized we go through jars of that. Was that fun? Is it a nut?
Yes. I would think, actually, I think there would be 3 of the F's, because I haven't checked, but because there's cocoa, because there's nuts, that would bring an element of fiber. Then there would be a fat because of the cocoa powder and the nut, and the fun. So the Nutella would be fun, fat, and fiber.
Oh, the kids will be so happy. So
I think a lot of parents will be happy to hear that too.
I know, it's delicious. We're going through jars at the moment, and I was sharing with you, Tristan is definitely one of those dads of, yes, you can have the fun, but there's also the practical. So this is the food I'm giving you. This is the food you need to eat. And you've touched on that briefly before in terms of eating together. So talk through that a little bit more in terms of where do we draw the line? Because I am the mom who will cook 2 or 3 different meals. And when I say cook, it's the chicken nuggets and chips. Or how do we help with that in terms of my kids?
So I think first thing we need to just differentiate, there is picky eaters, and that is something else, and it needs to be treated in a different light. But kids will go through phases where they'll only eat certain things. And I don't know about you, but I was raised in a home where that is what my mother is making, and that is what there is. There is no exception. She's not going to run and make me a sandwich if I don't want to eat mince and rice. That is what it is, and if I don't like it, then I leave it. So I think it's from the pressure aspect. We put so much pressure on ourselves when we worry that our child is going to go to bed hungry. Your child is not going to let him or herself starve. So I think it starts from the beginning. And this is one of the things that I did as a new single parent, was I only cook one meal because I don't have the capacity or the time. So I think if you find yourself in a position where you have been doing that, always have a safe food, a food that you know your child eats, and just repeatedly expose them to foods that you are making or foods that are new to them, because with repeated exposure, they will start to accept everything. So I think it is a case of, if you know your child is not a picky eater and there is no nutritional concern, this is what we're having. Make sure there is at least 1 or 2 foods on their plate that they do eat and they like, and that is it.
Yeah, again, simple, to the point. Again, Tristan would be so happy with that piece of advice, because he's always saying, I'm so lenient, the kids need to eat this. So yeah, thanks for that. Jane, I mean, you've given us so many cute tips, and it's practical tips. And I think there's also an element of, and I find it in so many of the podcasts, is be kind to yourself. Because again, I think especially when you are going through a divorce or a separation, we absolutely overcompensate for the kids.
Yes.
Where we as ourselves are still struggling to cope with whatever is happening. We're in survival mode. We're dealing with the stresses and the pressures and so there can be healthy food on the table, but it doesn't have to be these glamorous meals, again, that we're
No.
exposed to on social media all the time.
No, exactly. And I think it's so important to remember that social media is exactly that. It is a highlight. No one is showing their worst meal or a meal that doesn't look picture perfect. And I think we really do need to take the pressure off of ourselves and be kind to ourselves, because it's a massive shift. Your whole direction of your life is changing depending on, doesn't matter the scenario. And keeping it simple, focusing on one meal at a time. And when in doubt, just make sure your child is getting a multivitamin, because there are going to be weeks where you might be getting takeaway more often than not. And if you've got that multivitamin and you know at least they are getting in the nutrients that they should be getting in, but really just one meal at a time, and keep it as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate your life by now trying to make white sauce and fried this, and just really keep it simple.
That sounds like effort, and I'm already heading in the opposite direction. So I like that. And it's interesting because we actually, I think the name was Similac. Mila used to have the Similac shakes for a certain age group because she just wasn't eating enough, and that made a huge difference. So yeah, thank you for that tip.
Yes.
Jen, how do people reach out to you? I mean, I'm going to put all the bits and bobs in terms of the links and the write-ups, but give us a bit of a heads up.
All right, so if they want to get a hold of me, there's two options that they could use, probably the easiest way. Either send me an email, and that's jen@nourishdt.com. A lot of people always ask me what the DT stands for. DT is abbreviation for dietitian. And then my Instagram is the.nourishedmum, and more than welcome to send me a message on there as well.
Okay. And then you've also got a different profile or a separate profile called the Nourished Kitchen.
Yes. So that is my side hustle, my side hustle.
Okay. And that's recipes. I think I've seen lots of beautiful recipes, lots of cute tips. I think that's absolutely another page to follow. Jen, just in terms of, ending off this beautiful conversation, just any words of wisdom or just any thoughts you want to share with any of our viewers or listeners?
So two things. The first thing is, a healthy parent is a happy parent. And I think it's so important that with all the emotional things that you're going through, and we've spoken about running on adrenaline and high cortisol levels, using food to the best of its ability to make sure that you are physically feeling good, because if you're physically feeling good, you're going to help support your mental and emotional state. And again, how you feel about the food that you're eating, or the way that you're eating, or should I say the way your food is making you feel, is the same for your kid. So if you're eating in a way that's not going to give you sustained energy levels, it's not going to boost your immune system, and it's making you feel constantly tired, it's going to do the same thing for your child. So first thing, a healthy parent is a happy parent. And especially when you're a single parent and you take responsibility for that child for a certain amount of days, you don't, like you said, you don't have a tag team. So I think it's even more so important to look after yourself from a mental state, especially through what you're eating. And then the second thing is, and this is possibly the most important thing, and this is one of the biggest shifts or motivating factors that made me change my relationship with food and my body image, is that we set the foundation for our children. And they learn from us from a young age. They learn about the food and nutrition. They learn about a relationship with food. They learn about body image. And they literally look at you, and they are sponges, and they take in everything. And there is a big problem in this day and age with nutritional deficiencies in children, and obesity is a nutritional deficiency because they're not eating as they should be eating, and as well as a massive body image issue. And it seems to be starting younger every year. And yes, social media is partly to blame, but we also need to look at what we are exposing our kids to in our homes. And if you are coming from a place where you have a disordered body image or you don't have a good relationship with food, I remember when I was growing up, there was this perceived idea that my mother was always on a diet, or she couldn't eat this, or because she needed to lose weight. And it was perceived as, if she looks like that and I look like this, then what is it saying about myself? So I think we need to be very aware of what we are teaching our children, from what we are feeding ourselves, and how we are speaking to ourselves, looking at ourselves in the mirror, and treating ourselves, because we set that foundation for them.
Yeah. And I mean, that point too, for me, is just so powerful. I mean, I am a mother to a little girl, so I am very conscious about what I say about myself in front of Mina. And it's so interesting. Last night, and I mean, it's amazing how your kids see you. Last night, she was saying to me, "Mommy, you're the sunset and the sunrise and everything that's beautiful, that's you." And
it's beautiful.
I mean, and I don't know where it came from. It was just this beautiful validation. And I thought to myself, if she sees me that way, why do I see myself any other way? And it's so true. We tap into, and it could be something silly like mommy's on a diet. Mommy's not going to eat sweets this week. Or mommy can see that my bum is getting a bit big. Does my bum look big in these clothes? And they pick up on that. And absolutely it echoes later down the line. So, so powerful. Thank you for lifting that.
No, it's
Jen,
so
for
important.
Me, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. I mean, for me, over and above the fact that you are a single mommy, you've encompassed this journey and you've made it part of what you're passionate about, and you're focused on your little boy, and you've built this beautiful integrated life. And I know there's ebbs and flows, but what you're doing and the awareness you're creating on social media is just so powerful. So thank you so, so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Chantal. I really appreciate it. And I hope this helps as many people out there as possible. And last thing I want to say is, it does get better. I know there are times where you feel in your journey that it's overwhelming and you don't know where to start, and you quite sometimes honestly feel like you're drowning. But no amount of effort that you put in is ever in vain. It does get better, and it really is. Keep it simple and take off as much pressure that you put on yourself. Take it off. Take it all the way off.
This too shall pass. And it's easier said than done, but it absolutely does. This too shall pass. Jen, thank you. I am absolutely going to have you back on the podcast. This has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you again for making the time.